Welcome to The View, where recruitment, marketing and society comes together. Hello and welcome to The View, where recruitment, people and purpose come together. My name's Neil Armstrong from TriPad, and today I'm speaking with Lucy Andrews from Elevating 50. She's a career interim talent advisor, and she has set up an organisation which is helping businesses attract and retain the best talent from experienced people in the market who are over 50. There's a lot of interesting things happening right now that's really disrupting that space. And Lucy has got some excellent tips for candidates who are over 50 and looking for work, and organisations who are looking to tap into that experienced talent pool. So listen on for more. I am very happy to be speaking with Lucy Andrews today, and she is the director of Elevating 50, a consultancy firm that helps organisations tap into that growing and highly skilled talent pool of people who are over 50. Lucy, tell us a bit about yourself and tell us a bit about Elevating 50.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. Will do. So I've been working in TA probably a lot longer than I care to admit, but I started off in recruitment agency. So I was working in the city, and I will say it was back in the 90s. And since then, I've carved out a career as an interim. So I love the recruiting side, but I absolutely hated the sales side. So shifted in-house and sort of like did, cut my teeth as a recruitment manager working for the likes of Barclays, EMAP, etc. Sort of like doing the do, and then moved into behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So I always say to people, if they say, what did you do? I do everything to do with recruitment apart from recruit.
And when you were in that role as an interim in those different industries, what were the sort of differences and commonalities you saw between different companies that made you realise, actually, I can move from one organisation to another and take that expertise with me?
I think I was really lucky because I was, I think back then, interim or fractional as it is today wasn't really a thing. So not many people were doing it. So you were lucky you'd move from one bank or organisation to sort of like a different project. And because you'd touched on something in one, no one else had that kind of knowledge, if you like, in the market. So you're like,
Yeah.
I've done a bit of that. So you kind of grew on that. For instance, I did my first ATS implementation was back in, I think, 2010.
Okay.
Was the first one, and not many people, rec tech as it is today, is completely different landscape to how it was then.
Yeah. So you've really seen technology start from, just, I guess, a list of people in the 90s when you were in the agency world, through to the incredibly complicated, interrelated set of different technology tools that everybody's using today. So I guess you're probably really well positioned to advise companies on that. And then you set up your own recruiting business, Rocket Consulting, on-demand talent acquisition specialist. What was it that made you confident to go it alone?
I think I've always been interim, so I love that freedom. And it's not for everybody, and it has kind of like its highs and lows. But for me, it was just a real appeal of being sort of like my own boss, as it were, but also sort of like going into these great organizations. So
Yeah.
basically, it's kind of like coming in and delivering value and expertise really quickly. You hit the ground running because you're used to going into organizations and seeing quite quickly sort of like what's working, what's not working, and being able to advise on that. From that, I've done a lot of audit work. So going into organizations who don't have a TA team, don't have an ATS, so they might be starting from the ground up. You wouldn't believe it, but a couple more recently, I've walked into organisations that are still operating off of Excel spreadsheets, and so
Yeah.
looking to put in their first ATSs. And I
Wow.
think over the years, you kind of grow that knowledge. And I think because it's your everyday life, you take it for granted. But when you start talking to people, and I think the beauty of being an interim is you get to go around all the different organisations and see what great looks like and what
Yeah.
not so great looks like as well. So you can kind of, use it as a gauge.
And you get your own view of best practice, presumably, The more organizations
Definitely.
you see, the more you learn and then help your clients apply that. You mentioned sort of the
Yeah.
highs and lows of being an interim, having your own business. What are the lows? What are the downsides?
Is when you don't get business. I've been through kind of in 2000, when we've had the recession, etc. First thing that does go in any kind of, turmoil is recruitment. It tends to be, and
Yeah,
especially if you're at the back end of that recruitment. So, you have to take the highs with the lows. I've been really lucky and been able to sort of like work with clients throughout my career. But
yeah,
if anyone is thinking of becoming an interim, which I know, a lot of people are now because of the TA market as it is currently, you do have to kind of accept that there will be periods where you will be out of work as well. And
yeah.
also, I mean, I've been really, really lucky, but some people will see you are just that resource. So you kind of are treated accordingly, may not get a seat at every table that you want to be at.
Yeah. And do you, that sounds like a bit of a double-edged sword, right? As in, perhaps you're viewed as a tactical resource, so you're not included in things in the way you were describing, but perhaps maybe you don't get dragged into the sort of the office politics and drama in quite the same way as full-time employees.
Exactly, exactly. So yeah, you definitely don't get dragged into the drama, which is another plus, which was another reason, sort of like why I've enjoyed the interim route. For me, I love going in and delivering. I love sort of like going in somewhere, seeing what the problem is, if there is a problem, and coming up with a solution and fixing it, and then off you go kind of into the next project. I've been really lucky. I've managed to stay in quite a lot of organisations. So I've been renewed to go on to different projects. So during COVID, for example, I was working at the same organisation for almost 4 years.
Right. Right. Great. And I think, look, some people would say that's not luck. That's the fact that you're doing a quality job and people are appreciating what you're doing. Hopefully that's the case. So what was it led you to set up Elevating 50? What was the problem that you saw?
Gosh, yeah. So probably a couple of years ago, I'd like to say. So it started with my co-founder. So she got made redundant at the age of 49, and she'd had some real big kind of like ops leader roles, etc. And she was really struggling to find another role. And then more and more friends, and we're kind of like of a similar age, were male and female. And we found, well, I find there's a pattern. So if you're like me and you're an interim resource, or if you're made redundant, that's where the issue seems to come about. So last summer in particular, I had a load of friends who'd been made redundant.
Yeah.
I myself had finished up sort of like an assignment, and we were really struggling. I was just like, this is insane. These people, and they're in different industries, they do different roles. And it's like, I know you're biased because they're your friends, but you're like, God, they're really good at what they do. I can't understand. They're not even getting interviews. And
Yeah.
they'd come to me because obviously my background is TA. They're like, what am I doing wrong? What's going on with the ATS? How can I cheat it? Is it my CV, etc.? And I'm looking through thinking there is nothing wrong with what you're actually doing. So I can't understand why you're not getting through. And
Yeah.
then it happened to me, and started doing some research into the kind of, the background, the stats and what have you, and realized it is a systematic issue across not just the UK, but globally for people. It tends to be 45, 50 plus.
Yeah. I mean, and it's coming for us all. Obviously, I'm not elevating 50, but I'm rapidly approaching 50. And we did some research at TribePad a couple of years back into it was called Stop the Bias, and it was around discrimination and what initiatives recruiters were putting in place and what things candidates were worried about. And what we found was a disconnect that when we asked recruiters what they were working on, it was around gender, it was around ethnicity, sometimes around disability, and occasionally there were other things like forces leavers, care leavers, things like that. But the big three was gender, ethnicity, and disability. When we asked candidates, "What are you worried about? What have you experienced?" far and away the largest form of discrimination that people were worried about was age discrimination. And in hindsight, well, of course, that's kind of obvious because, 50% of the population are one gender or the other or somewhere in between. But every single one of us is aging. And
Yeah.
what we saw was basically people under the age of 25 often felt that they were too young, too inexperienced, and were getting screened out. And then we saw people above the age of about 35 who felt they were, it even started that low, felt like maybe they were too old for the role. So that, there's this depressingly small sweet spot of between 25 to 35 when apparently you're the quote unquote the right age for employment. But certainly we saw lots in the research that people above the age of 50 in particular were really concerned about being treated differently in the recruitment process and in the employment process. You've described there what you've seen in your own experience and that of your friends. Since you've been running Elevating 50, what stories have you come across in terms of clients and people you're helping?
Yeah, and do you know what you've just said there doesn't surprise me at all. So we've had people get in touch with us who are in their 40s who are experiencing that bias as well. And it's just really interesting. Obviously, as a population, we're aging. So you've got far more people who are kind of, living longer and better into 70s, 80s, etc. You've got pension age rising as well. Meanwhile, birth rates are falling. You've got a
Yeah,
smaller talent pool of young talent coming in, and yet there still seems to be this kind of real, and it's a growth and a productivity issue. You're ignoring. You've got this talent pool sat there who are known entities. They've got the skills, they've got the experience, they want to work. I think it's
yeah,
about, you've got about 800,000 people in the UK alone who are over 50 who want to work, who can't find work.
yeah,
And it's just kind of, when you look at it as a entirety, it's just quite baffling because you've got this real, pe- people are fishing in the same small talent pool if they're after that young talent now. And if you look at tech skills, they're more or less obsolete after 2.5 years now. So if you're at university now studying, by the time you actually graduate, what you're studying has changed anyway.
yeah.
So it's just looking at things differently. But yeah, what you say about the feedback you had doesn't surprise me at all because we're hearing exactly the same.
And so getting specific then, what is it that you're doing at Elevating 50? What's your proposition for your customers?
Yeah. So if we kind of have two streams. So one is obviously with organisations. So we will work with them we can go in and do an audit and look at what they're actually doing. So we will look at things like their ATS. Is it set up correctly? Are you screening people out that may not even realise, or you've configured something or using knockout questions, which are these people aren't even getting a look in.
Yeah,
We'll look at things like interview processes, who's on your interview panel. It's sort of like your TA team, how are they being trained, etc. So we will go in and we will help organizations attract, recruit and retain that talent pool. And yet we can do all manner of things to help them. And then we also have our kind of community. So we do a lot of work with people they may not even be out of work. They may be looking to go into a new role. So my business partner, Kathy, she is a sort of exec coach. And we have a great network of other coaches, etc., who can actually give kind of like real practical advice. It's looking at transferable skills, leveraging some, it's a confidence thing. Some people, especially
yeah,
if you've been out of work for a long time, you kind of can't see the wood for the trees, and it's looking at what have you actually delivered? What do you
yeah,
deliver? Instead of thinking, oh my God, I don't know how to use AI. There's other skills, and it's proven. You sort of like the old, if you have got people over 50, things like client relationships, conflict resolution, all of those things go up. So
yeah.
it's not forgetting those skills as well.
So what are the when you have somebody who's been out of work for let's say 6 months, they've been laid off. What are the top three things that you sort of advise them to do to make themselves more employable?
Gosh, I mean, it's easier said than done because I've been there, but it is really trying, not to kind of get into your head about it. It's not you've been made redundant. It's not sort of like you that has been made redundant. It is the role that
Yeah.
has been made redundant. And I
Yeah.
would really take the time to look at your CV. We get approached by people who have been in the same role for 20 odd years and they've just found themselves redundant for the first time,
Yeah.
and they haven't written a CV. So it's acknowledging if it has been a long time for you, things have changed, and the way people recruit has changed and the way people interview has changed as well. There's a lot of people using sort of like virtual and AI interview tools, etc. So I'd always say start at your CV. And it sounds obvious, but give it to other people to have a read of as well.
Absolutely.
And look at
Absolutely.
what the value you've added somewhere. So again, it's almost, I always say, have a conversation like we are now, and almost like, so what have you done in the last 20 years? And play it back to, your partner, your friend, or whoever, and get them to pick out those sort of like relevant bits, and then that's what you're going to add into your CV.
Yeah.
Leverage your network. So a lot of roles nowadays are going to people who, they don't even hit kind of LinkedIn, job boards, etc. So go back to your network. And if you have been in the same organization for 20 years, don't think that that is just your network. You would have worked with people who have left and gone on to other organizations, etc. And just let them know that you are looking for work. I
Yeah.
think LinkedIn's kind of like a double-edged sword, but if people don't know you're looking, then they're not going to help you. So put the post on LinkedIn, difficult as it may be for some people, and just let your network know that you are looking as well.
A quick side there. On you mentioned LinkedIn's a double-edged sword, and I know there's been quite a bit of debate about the old green open to work sort of halo
Yeah.
around your picture. Do you have a view on that?
Swing between both, I'll be honest, and I've used it myself, and I think it's great to. So again, if roles aren't being advertised, if you put on LinkedIn that you're open to work, it's only people who are recruiters who can see that. Whereas if you do put the green badge on, the
Yeah.
person that you worked with 5 years ago will go, "Oh, Lucy's looking for work again," etc. I
Yeah.
don't see the harm in it at all, but so I really get that some people feel uncomfortable with it.
Great, thanks. Well, then, the flip side of that, then, when you go into an organisation who's asked you to come in and presumably help, they're looking to access talent above the age of 50. What are the things that you see employers getting wrong that you can just sort of immediately make quick gains with?
Yeah. There's so much, and I think, like you alluded to at the beginning, I think people are focused on sort of like gender, ethnicity, etc. Age just seems to be completely kind of overridden, even though it is a protected characteristic, etc. And there are so many things that you can be doing. So look at your careers page. Is it representative of kind of people who are 50 and over? And by that
Yeah.
I mean not having people with walking sticks and grey hair and that kind of stereotype, because I
Yeah.
see so much of that. And as someone who is over 50, that doesn't represent me, and it doesn't represent, a lot of my friends and network. So just having sort of like a look at that. Who's on your interview panel? Do you have a representative range, age ranges, etc.? Looking at what's the environment like? I don't want to sit on a beanbag all day and kind of, so is your actual office environment
Yeah.
welcoming to all different ages, etc.?
Yeah.
And I suppose for me, they are quite basic things, but it is just looking through someone else's lens, talking to people in the organization. How do they feel? And I think that's a massive thing, is the lack of communication. So having career conversations with people who are late 40s is, what's your plan? Where do you want, how can we assist you? What learning is available for people? People
Yeah.
need to be lifelong learning now. Are you upskilling them? What are their plans? Worst thing you can do is you don't talk to your employees, and all of a sudden in 5 years, half of your skills go walking out the door and you have no contingency plan for it.
Yeah. Yeah. What's this might be a difficult question to answer because I guess we all have a different perspective at this age than we did when we were younger. Were you aware of this, earlier in your interim career? Were you aware of this as a problem, 20 years ago?
Not at all. And it's really easy, isn't it? Because I just have this vision of looking around wherever I was working and seeing really good sort of like role models for me,
Yeah. Yeah.
who were sort of like 15 over. So I think it definitely has changed, and the numbers are still going up. So I think sort of like COVID time is probably where, and also IR35, you saw a
Yeah.
lot of experienced people sort of like leaving the workforce around that time. So I think it definitely is kind of, we are seeing people drop off. But no, not at all. I mean, God, to be honest, I thought my career, my trajectory was going up into later life, because I'd be consulting, doing less days but earning more. And I
Yeah.
never sort of like thought, oh, at the age of 50, that you'd be struggling to find contract work where you've always managed to walk into it.
Yeah. And
So yeah, definitely.
there does seem to have been that big. I mean, you've mentioned COVID having a really big impact on the workforce as a whole. It seems to have had a very big impact in recruitment, where we saw, obviously the COVID layoffs, the big rehire. Recruiters were in short supply and big demand, and then it feels like there was an overhire, and at that point,
Yeah.
talent teams got cut, experienced employees were made redundant, contractors were cut out. And while the volume of new jobs has been coming down steadily, it seems to have bottomed out perhaps in the autumn last year, and it's now sort of steadily growing. But it feels like there were a pretty large number of experienced recruiters exited from businesses and perhaps
Yeah.
backfilled with younger, less experienced people. And now those more experienced recruiters seem to be finding it hard to get back into the market. Is that what you're seeing?
I completely agree with you, and that's exactly my view on it as well. So I think we are still in that kind of COVID hangover. And you're right, especially the tech firms, they went through the roof kind of hiring. And I think, what we were seeing is a lot of inexperience, because they needed to get the bums on seats. They were
Yeah,
bringing in people who weren't as experienced, sort of like in the TA world. And I think that, combined with AI,
yeah,
much like, hey, people are utilizing AI that isn't necessarily kind of the best AI or workflows, or, necessarily kind of, when I say ethical, some people are sitting in Claude and making their own workflows, etc. So I think there's kind of like that real combination. So it's like the perfect storm. But I
yeah,
agree, and you've got some great talent sitting there. I hope so. We leverage, we're really advocates for technology in what we do. So obviously, my background, I've done a lot of ATS implementations, and sort of like, have a good understanding of AI within the recruitment space. And we love it, but we will always be human centric first and
yeah,
foremost. And
yeah,
I really hope that we do see that across the wider, the reason I got into recruitment is because I loved giving people jobs. You were, I started off in HR and hated being doom and gloom, and loved being, the person that gave people jobs. So I
yeah.
think to lose that and to just turn recruiting into a process is just, a crime shame. And it shouldn't
Yeah,
be like that.
I completely agree. You often hear, nobody got into recruiting for the admin, and likewise, very few people, I think, get into recruiting to manage a workflow in a technology stack. It should be
Exactly.
a human to human connection. It should be about it should be about joy. The joy of
Exactly.
finding somebody who's brilliant for your job, who's going to make a difference to your business, and that job is going to make an amazing impact for their life. But whether we like it or not, technology during your career has transformed recruitment, and we are
Yes.
now into this period of AI driving even more transformation. And I think in many organizations, both technology and firms buying the technology, there's this view that recruitment is a simple left to right workflow that is ripe for automation. I wonder what your view is on the pros and cons of AI, specifically for
Mm.
those over. Well, actually, let's start with what you think the pros and cons are, and then let's maybe come back
Yeah.
to, and what do you think the impact is for people over 50?
Yeah. Okay. As I say, so I'm a massive technology advocate. So I'm not going to sit here and say, I see it transform functions, and I think it is fantastic in terms of the kind of repetitive. So a prime example where I see a benefit is interview scheduling. So especially if you're doing it en masse, so if you're doing graduate recruitment, sort of like assessment days, that kind of thing. It is fantastic. So 100%, I think that is where AI should be leveraged. But it should be a tool that allows you to then free up time to speak to candidates.
Yeah.
So, I still see the role of the coordinator or, sort of like the recruitment administrator who will then actually pick up the phone and at the end of the day, we do have a skills shortage and we should be fighting for talent. We shouldn't just be automating everything. These tools are there to kind of like elevate the hiring experience, the candidate experience, but you still need that person to pick up the phone and, onboarding as well. I've always been a
Yeah.
massive advocate for having a real human onboarding experience. So whether it's the hiring manager calling the candidate the Friday before they start saying, can't wait to have you on board, this is what Monday's going to look like, etc. I think to automate it, just especially when I mean, we hear of people who are being rejected really quickly and, we're talking in their hundreds
Yeah.
of these sort of like applicate because you've got easy apply switched on. It's so easy for people to just click, click, click on their phone. There's no art of actually applying if it's an easy apply. And I've done
Yeah.
it myself. Sometimes you think, oh, I haven't got that, but I'm going to chance my arm and I'll just press click.
Yeah.
So you're seeing now it compounded and sort of like applications and rejections happening en masse. I just see that there could be some tweaks that would stop all of that. You could still be efficient, you can
Yeah.
still run a great process, but you bring that human element back in.
Yeah, yeah. And that gives us hope for what's coming. So as you say, it's an aging population, a shrinking workforce, missing skills. So what are the things you're optimistic about in terms of things that you think should change and will change over the next few years?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm seeing a groundswell, like it's a movement. You can feel it happening where the organizations that we speak to, the people we speak to, are kind of like waking up to this isn't a DEI nice to have. This is about productivity and growth, and it's not just if you kind of like up your team 10% to include over 50s, your productivity goes up 1.1%.
Yeah,
And it's, if you look at it holistically as well, you look at people's spending power. So typically, if you're sort of like older in life, you have more disposable income. So what I'm seeing, and I'm not saying it's incorrect, but you look at the number of grad schemes, the number of early career schemes, the amount of funding going into early careers, but there is a small talent pool, and everybody is fighting for that same pool of talent.
yeah,
Meanwhile, over here, you've got this huge pool of talent. So my dream would be you start seeing job adverts advertising for, a plus 50 sort of like manager instead of early careers and building sort of like cohorts for the over 50s, etc. and kind of like flipping it on because you do have this pool just waiting to be tapped into.
yeah, yeah.
And its productivity goes up, sick days go down, it's all proven stuff. So I'm optimistic because I am feeling, and the conversations we're having with organizations, they're seeing this. So I am optimistic that it will change. We
Great.
will keep banging the drum to kind of, and we've got all the data and stats, which we won't bore you with today, but the figures are there and they speak for themselves.
Fantastic. I wonder if you mentioned a sort of a success story there. I wonder if there's an organization, you don't have to name them, but I wonder if there's an example where you've gone in, they had a problem and you can see this great outcome for either the company or the candidates or both. A story you can share?
I mean, yes. I mean, I suppose one which is like a really sort of like a great story is around when you're dealing with sort of like anything customer service or so for me, my background is predominantly sort of like financial services, etc. So when you see opening up that talent pool, so when you have, for instance, people advising on pensions, except
Yeah,
so people who if you're talking to about your pension you don't necessarily want to be speaking to somebody who is 20 who I remember what I was like in my 20s. I didn't even think of a pension, etc. So doing work and to opening up the barriers that were there to getting in a sort of like a older workforce
Yeah.
to sort of like deal with sort of like pensions, sort of like advice, etc. And that just worked really well. Complaints went down, customer satisfaction went up. It's giving, for me, it's not, what I hate is, just because you're 50, just give them a job. It's not about that. It's about having the same job you're doing, meaningful. You're just
Yeah.
not falling off of a sort of like cliff as soon as you hit 50.
That sounds good to me because that's 12 months away for me. So I'm very keen not to fall off that cliff. And so what, knowing that we're talking about age and experience here, if you could go back to your 20-year-old self at the beginning of your
Mm.
recruitment career, what advice would you give?
I chose a path that really suited me. And when I first started out, as I say, there weren't many people doing sort of like interim. And it was new, and it was really kind of like just not many people were doing it, but it's what I wanted to do. So my
Yeah.
advice would be, understand what you like, understand what you're good at, and sort of like keep with it. And don't let anyone kind of dissuade you or knock your confidence. I've had so many people of like years ago, sort of like family members. I think they just think, oh, you're just a bum who kind of like work. They don't understand sort of like the interim way of working. So I
Yeah.
just say, if you're really passionate about something, then just pick your path, enjoy the journey on the way as well, because I've gone on some real kind of like zigzags. Haven't had that kind of straightforward career at all. So just kind of like enjoy it as well.
Stick to your guns and enjoy the journey. Sounds like great advice.
Yeah,
Lucy, thank you so much for joining us today.
thank you.
My thanks to Lucy Andrews from Elevating 50, who chatted today about the initiatives she and her organisation are putting in place to help candidates who are over 50 find work and help organisations tap into that experienced talent pool. Huge disruption has happened since COVID, and now AI is bringing a whole new generation of disruption, but there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of things to be optimistic about. Thank you for joining us on The View. You can subscribe at tripad.com/The View or on Spotify or YouTube, and do share this with a friend. See you next time.